Credo si possa iniziare. Welcome, good afternoon, everyone. We are beginning the more technical session of this afternoon. Hope you enjoy the lunch. And my name is Edoardo Scepi. I'm one of the EBM experts involved in the Mid4EBM project. My principal task is working together with the 4 different project partners teams for training in the use of advanced tool as the one we are going to illustrate. My presentation will be focused on an explanation and introduction of the methodology and the software tools we use for implementing this project. Okay, we're ready. So, the Mediterranean Forum for the Ecosystem-Based Management Initiative, our project, the Med4EBM, as you now perfectly understand, is a partnership project founded by the NEC-BC Med program. The project aims at enhancing capacities of the various stakeholders involved and the institutional actors in the management of coastal and marine areas, and also at establishing a cooperative and cooperational platform for efficiently implement the ecosystem-based integrated coastal zone management, the EBICZM. Med4EBM proposed the use of some innovative tools to tackle the main issue which currently limit the widespread of these the widespread and the incorporation of the EBM into the integrated coastal zone management process. These issues, most over, are related to the difficulties that the decision maker and the professional team involved face, because the ecosystem-based integrated coastal zone management require mainly 3 fundamental aspects. One of these fundamental aspects is an intense and continuous effort to coordinate the management, all the management action across a wider range of stakeholders and different situations. Another aspect very important is the intensive work required by the team of professionals that are implementing the ecosystem-based integrated coastal zone management. And the third one, the things that is most important from the technical point of view, the pure technical point of view, is of course that this kind of approach requires a significant amount of data and large database. Med4EBM intends to breaking the above the above mentioned limit and variant, using an innovative land and sea management packages which make the ecosystem-based integrated coastal zone management easier for the professional team, the stakeholder, and moreover for the decision maker that are involved in this kind of activities. These methods allow handling the analytical process through a straightforward path, providing analytical methods and for analyzing the situation, as well for assessment and integrating all the relevant sectors that are present in the area or in the topic that we need to manage. This approach also is very helpful because support the team and the stakeholder to identify and quantitatively assess the relationship between ecosystem components, the function and the services along all the associated human activities, even towards the establishing of these multi-stakeholder integrated coastal zone management scheme. Why we need this integrated scheme? Because stakeholder usually, according to the topic, to the field where they belongs, can see the same reality from a considerable different point of view. If you are a pure ecological stakeholder, the things that you can able to see in this picture are coastal line, island, coral reef. But if you are a pure touristical stakeholder, for you, the parameter and the component to be considered are different: small hotel, large resort, the cruise ship company. So to avoiding to force people to analyzing things and aspect and component in a two different way from their main vision, we implement this approach and methodology. Of course, the harmonization of this different point of view is a crucial aspect, because as also mentioned by Dr. Cruciani in his presentation, I think that is a crucial aspect, because effectively talking together when you have to manage maybe the same task from different point of view is not easy. For this, avoiding all the conflict inside the multi-sector and multidisciplinary working group is a fundamental task, because otherwise, so the effectiveness of the management will lose. On the other hand, since that an effective management cannot be performed without a robust background of scientific and non-scientific data set, a dedicated software suite was specifically developed and applied in this project for driving the data collection and the data management of all the needed information that must be characterized by different spatial and temporal trends, because we need to investigate all the different spatial related to the territory, but also along a time trends. So now that we introduce the general concept of the methodology and the software tool, we are going to see which are these method and tools. Consider that you will be see the real output, the real representation of this methodology and tools in the upcoming presentation of the 4 different project partners that will be later than me. So basically there are 2 categories of instruments: an operational protocol for the execution of a multidisciplinary ecosystem-based environmental assessment, and a software package that link the spatial and the tabular database to support the analysis of the relevant ecological parameter and data and the preparation of efficient and synoptic report. The operational protocol, okay, starts with the phase called ecosystem context analysis. That is the methodological part of the tool and methodology provided for allowing this multi-stakeholder analysis. It allows establishing a managing and participatory analysis process that ensure an effective dialogue among all the different parties involved: civil society, technical and scientific organization, administrative institution, for reaching a common understanding of the relevant context of the relevant context for recognizing the connection that we need to manage across our ecological and human system relevant of the area that we have to manage. This phase usually is performed with implementing a series of 3 or usually 3, but can be also 4 different workshops involving the technical internal team and of course all the stakeholders involved. For recognizing and identifying all the connection within and across the ecological and human system, the output that we produce is basically a box and arrow system diagram that is describing all the natural and human system that we have to manage. Components, of course, are the boxes, and connection are the arrow that you see, that it's possible to see here in the picture on the right. Of course, each of these diagram elements is then further characterized through a set of quantitative indicators that enable you to especially assess the current status at the moment of the analysis, as well as monitoring the evolution of the component itself, of the dynamics that impact, good or not, the component itself. For effectively managing all these crucial steps, and also the results that it's possible to obtain from this methodology, we use an innovative software tool, the Project ISP60, that is a software package that allows synchronizing in many different multi-windows environment, different information, graphical, non-graphical, tabular, and whatever, facilitating the ecosystem-based analysis of the spatial and tabular dataset that otherwise will be spread in many different format and moreover software. Talking a bit more technical, is a user-friendly Microsoft Windows application that can support the implementation of this kind of methodology and approach for sustaining the most different pursuit. We can work about sustainable development, the ecosystem-based management, as well as biodiversity conservation, and moreover. So it's just a matter of how you implement the analysis of your system to be managed, and the software and the methodology can support you in any aspect. Of course, we have the EBM model that we are going to see very in detail with the project partner presentation. These quantitative indicators that enable you to quantify and monitoring each component, and representation of the data in spatial and time trends. One of the final steps of this methodology that we are going to partially see in the presentation, in the upcoming presentation, is the system cause effect analysis. That is another straightforward procedure that systematically analyze all the component of the system diagram that was resulting from the ecosystem context analysis, that is the first step of the methodology, to define an integrated set of management measures coherent with the principle of the ecosystem-based integrated coastal zone management. This analysis considers systematically pairs, or more than two, so depends from the dynamic that you are analyzing, pairs of component of the system diagram. For what? For assessing the conservation and or the development status of each component and pair of component, or more than two, and also their interaction among each other. Estimate the current level of the use of the impact on the relevant ecosystem services provided by this component inside the ecosystem, and use this assessment and estimation to identify and propose management measures targeted and specifically developed into the sustainable use of these ecosystem services. All this set, so the very end step of this methodology and methodology and procedure is a set of management measures that are then mainstreamed in governance, so on existing action and management plan to support and enhance the management and the result obtained through this action. I'm concluded. Thank you for the attention, and I hope to be enough clear talking about this technical aspect. And now I'm going to please to leave the chair to Matteo Onori. Let me.
Thank you, Eduardo.
Matteo is the GIS and database expert of the project partner 2, Amici della Terra, that is the official manager and of the reserve here in Calabria, Foce del Fiume, Crati and Lago Tarzia. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. I am Matteo Onori. I am the GIS and database expert for Amici della Terra. My presentation is called MED for ABM Application Experience in the Corigliano Gulf, Italy. Today, I will show you the main steps of the ABM experience. For convenience sake, I decided to group all the official steps in 3 main steps. The first one, as you can see from the slide, concerns the workshop and the stakeholders' involvement. This was the first moment for the identification of the socioeconomic and environmental components of our project area. We will see later the phase number 2, which is the ABM technical work, in which in this phase we'll analyze the data collection, the diagram formatting, the gap analysis, and eventually we will watch to a video concerning the ISP feeding. Following the phase number 2, there will be the phase number 3, which is the system cause effect analysis, but we decided to tackle it during the session of tomorrow morning. I want you to put the attention of the arrow that goes from the top left of the screen to the top right. This is because I think that the workshops and stakeholder involvement has a role in the success of the other phases as well. Okay, we will start talking about the first phase. Actually, the first phase of the ABM protocol consists of 3 main parts, which Eduardo explained before for sure better than me. The first one is the definition of the key stakeholders, as well as their role in the project. The second one is the spatial and thematic scopes of the ABM application. And the third one is the ecosystem context analysis. So as I say, the first phase is the key stakeholders involvement. As you can see from the image, we of course made a lot of workshops, but they were held online due to coronavirus pandemic. The second steps consist in the spatial and thematic scopes of ABM application, which was important for the definition of the major characteristics of the area. It was important both in terms of spatial definition. This means that we had to choose which municipalities would be part of our area. And you can see the image. All the municipalities that we chose correspond to a distinct territorial unit here in Calabria, which is the Sibari Plain. Moreover, the work that we have done with the stakeholders helped us in the identification of criticalities and resources of the area. On the left side of the screen, you can see a part of the, this is the national map of land use. You can see that the Sibari Plain, which is the largest plain here in Calabria, of course, has a consistent agricultural activity. On the right side, you can see that our area has the Domenico Pappatera, which is the president of Pollino Park, said this morning, is home of many Natura 2000 sites, among which, of course, we have to mention the Pollino National Park, which is the largest park in Italy, and also the reservoirs of Tarsia Lake and Crati River, which we visited yesterday. The aim of the third part, which is the ecosystem context analysis, was to define the environmental and socioeconomic components that the stakeholders consider distinctive in our area. The following step was to spatially organize the components in a framework. And in this framework, all the components are represented by an arrow or a box. Of course, as Eduardo said before, the framework takes the name of system diagram. We decided alongside the stakeholders to divide the diagram in 2 main parts. The first one is the socioeconomic matrix, is represented by the yellow box here in the slide, and it contains all the anthropic components such as industry, infrastructures, agriculture, fishing, breeding, ports, and so on. The second one in the green box is the environmental matrix, which contains all the environmental components such as air, water, soil, flora, fauna, and habitats. Of course, I want you to notice and I want you to pay attention to the fact that this was a participatory process. So it was not something that we decided, but it was something that was decided alongside the stakeholders. This is the graphical representation of the system diagram. We will see this is the old version of the system diagram. You can recognize on the left the big environmental matrix, while on the right there is the socioeconomic metrics. These are the components, the boxes are the components to which in the technical part of the project we have attached all the data collected. Now we will see in more detail the main steps of ABM technical work, of course, on which I worked with more effort because I am the GIS and database expert from Amici della Terra with Marrico Benelli, which is there, but didn't listen. And we will not focus on what results we obtain, but rather on how we obtain these results. This is a flow chart describing the logical and chronological sequence of the phase number 2. We have started from the main product of the workshops, which is the system diagram, and we decided to reorganize the spatial organization of the components. Then we started working on data gathering, which was the hardest task, as well as the other partners, for 2 reasons. The first one is that we wanted to know which data were necessary to populate the ISP software. The second reason is that we had to find this data, which was the hardest task at all. The next steps were addressed almost at the same times. We have the gap analysis, which helped us in the definition of the data gathering new strategies and the definition of indicators as well. And eventually, at the end of the presentation, we will watch a video that concerns the ESP feeding and the system cause effect analysis. Okay, now we will start speaking really briefly about the diagram formatting. So the diagram that I showed you before, that was drawn up with the help of the stakeholders, was modified to achieve 3 main objectives. The first one is readability. You will see that we improved the graphical display and the spatial organization of the components. The second objective is functionality. Actually, we adopt the official nomenclature for the components of the diagram. And we took the official nomenclature, of course, from Italian and European institutions that are responsible for publishing the data. The last one is stratification. We wanted to create multi-level components to display data at different levels of detail. You can see the example of agriculture represented by a pyramid on the right. We have taken from ISTAT, which is the Italian National Institute of Statistics, both the data concerning agriculture, of course, and the second thing that we have taken from ISTAT, of course, is nomenclature. So this is a practical example on ISP software of what stratification means. You can see that the agricultural land, which is the top of the pyramid, can be represented by, for example, as a sum of utilized agricultural area and other land. And in the graph on the left, which is taken from ESP elaboration, we can see the total of agricultural land, while we choose the sticked bar to display utilized agricultural area and other land. Going deeper, you can see only the utilized agricultural area as a sum of grasslands, arable croplands, permanent croplands, and family gardens. And going even deeper, you can see arable croplands with its composition. In this case, cereals, legumes, potatoes, industrial plants, and further crops. This is how the agricultural component of the diagram evolved after our work. Of course, the components that have been identified by the stakeholders have not been deleted, but absorbed in the new components. And of course, the same work has been done with the other components of the diagram. This is how the diagram looked before, and this is how the diagram looks now. As you can see, the overall frame of the diagram has not been changed. You can still recognize the environmental matrix on the left and the socioeconomic matrix on the right. Now we will speak about the data gathering and management. So this is the hardest part. because the data collection procedure is the heart of ISP feeding, of course. During the gathering of the data, we tried to answer two questions. The first one is what? Because we needed data that could be linked to the corresponding socioeconomic and environmental component in the diagram. And so we started gathering data, both from data banks and the stakeholders. Among them, we have ISTAT, ARPACAL. Domenico Pappadera, which spoke this morning, is the director of ARPACAL. ARSAC, ISPRA, university, municipalities, and European agencies such as Eurostat Environmental European Agency. The following step, as I told you, was to attach the data to the corresponding environmental or socioeconomic component. The second question we wanted to answer was how. Of course, when, because this is the point, when we could assess the data. We often had extremely detailed data banks. For this reason, we try to focus on three elements. The first one is sustainability. We have to remember that the software and in general, the workflow has to be fed also in the next years, because in the next years, we hope that new updated data will be released. So we decided to leave out data that is extremely detailed or not useful for our investigation. The second one is functionality. Firstly, we focused on data that could ensure an immediate and understandable representation of the phenomena. Third one is uniformity. We wanted the data, of course, to be formatted in a certain way, and to do so, we used Excel tables and SQL Server. Now we will speak about the gap analysis. There are three main factors that form our gap analysis. The first one is that we don't have access to data. Less often, the data seem not to be produced. This means that the data is produced, but not yet published. Within the environmental matrix, we haven't found data for chemical stauds of groundwater and surface water, as well as terrestrial habitats. Within the socioeconomic matrix, we haven't found data for infrastructure, fishing, ports, and wastewater. The solution we propose is to involve the stakeholder even more to get the data, of course. This has happened, we will see this tomorrow, for fauna and flora, which we got from University of Calabria. The second factor that form our gap analysis is that we have access to data with not adequate spatial resolution. Again, data are gathered with a municipality resolution or by point, but then is published with an aggregate form. This is the case, at least for Italian diagram, for fertilizers, soils improvers, tourist arrival and presence. Here we have proceeded upscaling our data with SQL and Excel estimates. At the same time, doing these estimates, we wanted to have at least one official value with municipality resolution to evaluate our estimation. This is an example of our estimation over tourist presence. We had the verified value from an official report of 2015 with a municipality resolution. And we have estimated a value of 432,000 presences in 2015, which is just 2,000 less than the official value. So actually we could use this data. The third factor is that we have access to data with a not adequate time resolution. Again, the data are published with a lower resolution than it's produced. And I want to say again that having data with a better resolution lead to a better system cause-effect analysis. For example, this example, we have data for air quality, the station that we saw yesterday, in aggregate form. So we have annual means for air quality. But of course, I would like to know with higher detailed data if there is some peak during, for example, the summer period, to know if the tourists have, for example, a pressure, a more impact on the air quality in that area. Now we will see the definition of indicators in which Mariko worked a lot. Tomorrow we will tackle it with more time. But concerning the identification of indicators, we have adopted a model which is widely used in scientific literature. It is the DPS-IR model. As you can see from the image, it is a circular system where each class has an effect on the following class. So starting from the drivers, which are agriculture, industry, tourism, we know that they cause a pressure, for example, pollution, to the state of the environment, for example, to the water and soil qualities. These elements lead to impact. So, for example, an impact on biodiversity, to which there should be a response at the institutional level. So we started from this model to create a more complex net of indicators. This is the result of our reworking of the DPS-IR model, because it was a linear model, but in this case, it's like a 3D set of indicators. And we have adapted not just the socioeconomic and environmental metrics of our diagram to the DPS-IR model, but all the stages of our work. And so we have the pressure indicators and the driver indicators that are related to the socioeconomic metrics of the diagram. We have the impact indicators that describe the change in the state, and so in the environmental components of the diagram, due to the anthropogenic pressures. And at the end, we have the response indicators that describe a human action taken to resolve the problems. I'm going to show you a short video about the data and the ISP software. We will see the data that we gather from the Environmental European Agency is data concerning bathing water. It's aggregate form, so actually it's not so useful for our work. Then we will compare them with the same data, but with higher detail. We took it from ARPACAL. And at the end, we will compare the high quality data with number of beds in the hotel in the area. So we have selected the body water data quality component in the diagram. Here, the data is aggregated by the European Environmental Agency. The quality is divided into 4 classes that go from 1, which is poor, to 4, which is excellent. From the graph, you can see that almost all official points of survey in our project area have a good or excellent quality. The same thing that Domenico Pappatera said this morning. So I can think that the quality is quite good, but we have to remember that this data aggregated by here. Same thing, okay. You can see that most of the points are with a blue color, which means that they have excellent quality. Okay, I have selected higher detail quality data, the same data, but with a higher detail from ARPACAL, which we collected from official reports. From the graph, you can see that in the top, there are annual means for Enterococcus, and in the middle for E. coli, that are under the limits, not so much, but under the limits, while the peaks for the summer periods are higher than the limits. This happened for 2 municipalities, which are Cassano al Ionio, which we are, and Corigliano Rossano. In the lower graph, I can see that the limits have been exceeded 13 times and 6 times during the summer period. Okay. The strength of this software is that it lets you cross the data in a short amount of time. In literally 10 minutes, I crossed the values of Enterococcus and E. coli with a number of beds in hotel, which you can see this time at the bottom of the graph. And you can see that there is a strong correlation that has to be verified, of course, between the exceedances, the peaks in the summer period with the number of beds. Of course, still, the top of the graph is the same as before, but there is a correspondence with the number of beds in the municipalities. So lastly, we want to recall which were the two important results of our work until now. First of all, we managed to involve all the stakeholders in our project. Both of the phases, the first one, the middle one, and the third one, which I remember is not the official division of steps in our project. Second, we have started a systematic and sustainable gathering procedure of our data. And all these two efforts lead us to what we are currently doing, which is the system cause-effect analysis, which we will take a look tomorrow with the help of Marico Benelli. Thank you.
Thank you, Matteo. Very interesting presentation. And without wanting, we confirm what the president of ARPACAL, Dr. Papaterra, tells this morning. So thanks a lot. If you have any question or consideration, please keep it for the end of the session, so we will do all together. Thanks a lot. I will invite on the stage for speaking Madame Amel Belhaj-Zouari, that she's the project coordinator for the Med4EBM project for the Tunisian partner, and representative also the INSTM.
So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much, Eduardo. And again, I would like to thank the Amici della Terra for the efforts made and the commitment for the organization of this forum event, and also all our partners in our Med4EBM project. So on behalf of the National Institute of Marine Sciences and Technology, I present today our work on Kneis Islands ecosystem. So the Tunisian study area is the archipelago of Kneis Islands, which is located in the Gulf of Kebes, south of Tunisia. And it includes, it's composed of 4 islets. It covers a surface area of 442 hectares, and it's classified as nature reserve since 1993. This reserve benefits of several international designations. So it's a specially protected area of Mediterranean importance since 2001. It's a Ramsar wetlands since 2007, and it is also considered as an important bird area. Also, a lot of efforts were made in Tunisia to upscale this area to a marine protected area. The management of Kneis Islands archipelago is a little bit complicated in Tunisia because it's under the control of 3 administrations belonging to 2 ministries, the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Environment. They are the General Directorate of Forestry, the Agency of Protection and Development of the Coastline, APAL, and the General Directorate of Fishing and Aquaculture. Kneis Islands ecosystem is really a unique ecosystem in the Mediterranean area because it has a particular composition of wetlands. They are seashores, the intertidal zone, the tidal channels, and the supratidal mudflats. And of course, all these areas are characterized by a spectacular biodiversity. Also, Kneis Islands is characterized by an extraordinary avifauna biodiversity. It's a migratory and nesting bird area. It receives between 130 and 160,000 migratory birds each year and up to 50,000 wintering birds. Also, around 3,000 pairs of breeding birds. To be honest, the avifauna component, it's the most component that makes the Kneis Island a very particular ecosystem in the Mediterranean. Fisheries activity also represent an important economical activity in this area. So with shore and coastal fishing, the shore fishing composed of clam harvesting. This activity, in fact, it involves around 300 of women who collect clams in this area. And this sector is almost unique for women. Also, there is a very important marine biodiversity in this area. The olive production, it's an important agriculture activity, but on the island. Like many other ecosystems, the Kneis ecosystem faces many issues, and here we present the main issues. For the wetlands, there are the sea level rise, the pollution, and the overgrazing. Regarding the avifauna, the egg trampling, the camping by the local population in nesting area, and this is to collect clams, and the reduction of intertidal zone, so which reduce and which affect this avifauna. For fisheries, the overexploitation of stocks, the illegal and unregulated fishing, fishermen in this area, so some fishermen in this area use some illegal technique, and of course the invasion of invasive species in this area, and the most important example is that of blue crabs. in order to apply to the ISP DSS tool, so we constructed for our study area the system diagram. So for this, we follow the participatory approach, and we involve the EBM expert and the stakeholders. So the stakeholders, including, of course, the administrators who control the marine area, the local authority, the scientists, the NGOs, and local population who benefit from the services of this ecosystem. So we organized 3 participatory workshops, and during which we defined the main component of this ecosystem, the main subcomponents, and the interactions between them. And also we defined the indicators that govern these interactions. The identification of indicators was based on two points, or it depends of 2 points. Firstly, the availability of data for our ecosystem and in this area, and also the importance and how this indicator could affect a subcomponent or a component, or how could affect an interaction between 2 components of our ecosystem. So when we have this system diagram, so for Kneiss Islands, the main components are the ecosystem, the infrastructure, the aquatic and terrestrial flora and fauna, and the socio-economic sectors and the weather parameters. For this tool, so this ESP tool, and this with which we arrive to this step of system diagram for our study area, it gives a clear and simple visualization of our ecosystem with its main components and interactions and also indicators. So it facilitates for the administrators to make decisions toward good management, toward resources sustainability, and toward also governmental protocol. Eduardo? Can I? So here I go more in detail in some components of our diagram system. For example, for the socio-economic sectors, we considered the coastal fishing, the shore fishing, and the purseine fishing. Also for the agriculture activities in this region. So there are olive production, production of cereals, and of vegetables. Also a livestock activity, and there are the industrial activity is represented in fact by 2 chemical and petroleum factories. Sorry. Also, so for the weather parameters, we consider the rainfall, the temperature, the humidity, and the wind, which are parameters that could affect the subcomponent and the component of our diagram system. Here, you note that we have the component, these red components and subcomponents are for which, the red components for which we have the available data. So the data which is the most critical task, as said Marco this morning. So it's not a simple, task. It's not a simple task to do. Why? For two reasons. Either the owners of data don't refuse to give us and to provide data for many reasons. If they are scientists, so they would like to publish their results before giving them to Med4EBM project. And if they are administrators or NGO, they would be to be partners in the project. And we should make a lot of efforts to convince them for the importance of this project and on the importance of the availability of the data to benefit from all this work and to benefit from the output provided in the framework of Med4EBM project. Yes. In fact, this tool, it allows us to analyze some subcomponents or interactions or affection in an integrated schema. So it allows us to follow the dynamics of a given subcomponents during at spatial and temporal scales. This depends on the kind of data you have integrated. So in this software, this is the first point, and also it allows us to understand the evolution, to follow the dynamics of of a given subcomponent with the threatened or with the parameters that it affected. So here, for example, for the Kneiss Islands for ecosystem is a vulnerable ecosystem which is threatened by the sea level rise. In the Gulf of Gabes, the sea level rise is more important than that of the whole Mediterranean. So the sea level rise can cause that the flow of the tidal canals which disrupt the habitats of clam. So, or I mentioned that the clam harvesting represents an important sector and activity for the local population. It involves more than 300 of women in this area. And so it will be a serious and a crucial problem for them. So the sea level rise can affect the shore fishing, which is represented mainly in this area by the clam harvesting. Also, on the other hand, the shore fishing is also affected by invasive species, such as the example of blue crabs, who during the recent year invade this area because they feed on the clam. The blue crabs feed on the clam, and so we will have a depletion of clam stock. pollution also generated by the industrial activity in this area can affect this shore fishing. So with this example, we show you how we can analyze the dynamics of given subcomponent in an integrated aspect. The shore fishing activity, so this tool allow us also to follow the dynamics of the shore fishing activity during the last 20 years in this area. As I said, it depends the time scale, it depends on the data you have already integrated in this area. And of course, more the data are extended in the period and in the time, more better is the analysis. So here for the clam harvest, we can see and we can analyze the distribution, their distribution at monthly scale, at yearly scale. And you can see that we have a decrease in the production from 2000 to 2008. And then there is an increase in the production of clam harvest from 2009 to 2018. But we haven't reached the maximum of clam harvest recorded during 2000. So this is the way that we can analyze more, we can analyze rapidly and easily our data. And it confirms this is an easy method and tool, and to avoid reports of hundreds of pages. And we can raise the attention on the real problems of an ecosystem or of a sector, a given sector. In the next phase of our study and during our project, we need to perform the cause-effect analysis to cross-analyze more the shore fishing. Here I give the example of shore fishing, but we should cross-analyze all our subcomponents with the factors they interact with. And this is using the ISP tool as a decision support system for a management plan and for a government protocol. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Amel. Thanks. And let me just introduce something, because it's the first thing that we are going to see is one of the peculiarity of the software, that is the simplification of that system diagram, because the system diagram representing the reality can be quite complicated, but you don't have to follow step by step the line on the screen. So the software, as you can see in the presentation from Madame Amel, is able to simplify the structure of the system, showing only the directly connected component in which we are interested. I'm calling for the next presentation Madame Nahed Saleb, that she's the project manager for the Lebanese team and the director of the TCNR reserve.
Thank you all. Okay, I'm gonna present the experience of TCNR in applying the tools provided by the Med4ABM project, and to show the efforts that have been so far executed under this project, and update you about how far we reached through this project. Actually, this is an aerial view of Tyre city that you can see here as the peninsula into the sea. And southward of it, you see the wide stretch of sand. This is the start point of Tyre Coast Nature Reserve. Starting by the touristic zone, which is the famous beach of TCNR, worldwide known, and it's an attraction site for tourism. Followed by the conservation zone covered by some vegetation, and then south of it there is the refugee camp that cuts the reserve in the middle. And the last part of the reserve is the agricultural zone of Ras Al Ain. Now, as I am presenting it, you notice that our reserve has three different components. And I can add to it that it has a fourth component, which is the marine zone facing the terrestrial part. So there is a touristic zone, there is a conservation zone, and there is an agricultural zone. And facing all that terrestrial site, there is the marine zone. And this entails a multitude of stakeholders, different ecological and ecosystem services. And this means that in order to be able or capable to properly manage this type of reserve, we need to have an integrated system and a holistic approach, and something that simplifies our management of these diverse ecosystems and dealing with different types of stakeholders. And this is how this project, especially the innovative tool of Project's ISP software that helped us to just recognizing the starting point to simplify our work. Now, as with our colleagues, we started first by defining our thematic area and defining it through a tabular form to define the main components, their subcomponents, and also later on with the discussion and with the interaction with the experts and with the stakeholders to define the interactions between these components, because you cannot define the interactions relying on your own knowledge. These stakeholders might have their own experience telling you what you ignored, so that if you wanna provide them with any intervention, they would accept it. If you had already opened the dialogue with them and let them define what the reserve represents for them. And this is what we did through a series of workshops, gathering data from experts who have already conducted a series of studies about the area and the reserve itself, which was the starting point of designing our system diagram. And finally, in order to better understand these interactions and to further develop the analysis of our system, and in order to be able to analyze the cause-effect dynamics and to later on base on these dynamics, our interventions as action plans and management plans, we define the indicators that would best describe these interactions, because these are measurable data that we can use in order to decide whether we need to intervene in this point or that point, what is the priority, etc. So our system has been defined first as the main biophysical components, and then we define the socioeconomical aspects related to it, that is the stakeholders, and then this is the plant, we define the flora, we define the fauna later, the coastal infrastructure that's around the reserve, in order also to put it in context. And after defining all these, we started to think about, okay, what is the priority to start with for our study and assessment and data gathering and definition of interventions in order to analyze the cost effect. Well, after this exercise has been done, it was easily defined, or for us, to select the water resources of Ras Al Ain that's present at the agricultural zone of Ras Al Ain, that is the southernmost part of the reserve here. This resource of water is a priority for us, not for us as the managers at the authority in charge of managing the reserve, but also for the entire community, for the community of Tir and its surrounding, because this source of water is the only source of domestic water for the entire area. Also, it's important for the farmers of Ras Al Ain, because it's part of this water is used for irrigation, and it's also for the environment and the ecosystems, because this water, the remaining part of it, flows out into the sea, making an interaction between fresh and salt water, which means it forms an estuary, and estuaries are among the most, or the richest, ecosystems and biodiversity. And this means that this particular component in our reserve has an effect on everything that is of importance for everyone. And this is why we prioritized studying the cost effect analysis about this component. So how we did that? First, we defined our study area. As you can see, this is the map of Lebanon, and the area where our study area falls in is the most southern part of Lebanon. It's the district of Tir. And in the enlarged map, you see the study area that we selected. This is the peninsula of Tir. I don't know if you can see the cursor on the screen. You can, no, you cannot? Okay, no problem. So the peninsula and the sea is Tir city, and the delineated part in blue south to Tir city is the reserve of Tir. So how to study and assess our water resource there? There are two approaches to assess it, either in quantity or in quality. And from looking back to the system diagram that we have, having had already defined our influencers over the quantity and quality of the reserve, now we could easily select which subcomponent or which aspect to focus on. We decided to focus on the quantitative measurement, measurement of the interaction between the main influencers, which are the farmers inside the reserve at Ras Al Ain, and upstream it, the farmers conducting agricultural activities upstream the reserve. Why? Because we're talking about water, and water is affected by upstream activities. We selected, or we decided to select the qualitative aspect, because quantifying it wouldn't really be easy, because the springs of Ras Al Ain, they emerge at Ras Al Ain, but its watershed is very huge, is in comparison to the reserve, and it extends to over 40 kilometers away, and we cannot possibly conduct a study to assess all the parameters there. So that's why we avoided assessing the effect of the farming activities and the overexploitation of water on the quantity of Ras Al Ain, but we decided to assess the agricultural land use, which is performed by the farmers in upstream Ras Al Ain, in the lower subcatchment of the entire watershed of Ras Al Ain. You can see here the dark blue dots. These represent the samples that were taken in that area. This is here a map that shows you in context what I'm talking about. In the colored map, this is the TCNR in its different sections. The red one to the north is the touristic zone, followed by the conservation zone, which is the core area of the reserve in yellow. In light green is the refugee camp, and in dark green is the agriculture zone of Ras Al Ain, where the springs of Ras Al Ain emerge. And you can see the red dot inside this area. This is actually two dots that are very close together, so they cannot be distinguished from each other, and they represent the two samples taken from the springs of Ras Al Ain. We took water samples from 26 sites, 2 from the springs of Ras Al Ain, and the other 24 samples were taken from wells upstream in the delineated area that you can see. And we conducted lab analysis defined by several parameters, and those parameters represent the pollutants that we might encounter in the water upon, it's okay, that's fine, upon pollution by chemicals, agricultural chemicals, like pesticides and fertilizers, in addition to other sources of pollution, like wastewater, like dumping sites, because solid waste would dissipate leachates that might reach the groundwater, and we had a concern about that in order to assess the quality of our valuable resource of Ras Al Ain. So these were all analyzed, like sodium, nitrate, nitrite, phosphate, and the heavy metals that would represent some of the pesticides used, and some of would generate from wastewater and solid waste. And we analyzed all those at the lab for the all the 26 samples. And the results showed that there is luckily no contamination with heavy metals. This means that we can eliminate the contamination by wastewater or solid waste leachates. This is a very good result. While for some of the chemicals that would be generated from the agro products, like fertilizers and pesticides, mainly fertilizers, we found two major elements that are generated by the overuse of nitrogenous fertilizers. And these two are, okay, I have to do that, no. Okay, so here, let me play the video. Wait, what? Okay, so this, how can I pause it? Just click, okay. So this slide shows the levels of nitrate in the 26 samples. The first two columns represent the two springs of Ras Al Ain. So they are way below the two thresholds of WHO for drinking water and FAO for irrigation water. while some of the other wells contained a certain contamination with nitrate. Nitrate pollution and reaching groundwater is somehow okay in comparison with its byproduct, which is why okay, I paused it. Okay, I will continue the video. In comparison with nitrite. So after nitrate is released in the system, it percolates down into the soil because it's an anion. And thank you. And anions are negatively signed. You know, NO3 minus. This is the formula of nitrate. And it's easily soluble, and it migrates downward easily because it's not retained by the soil particles. And so upon this migration, it gets oxidized and it transforms into nitrite, which is NO2 minus. And nitrite is a very toxic agent for humans and the biodiversity. This is why the WHO and the FAO set its threshold at the same threshold because there is no tolerance of nitrite. Any tiny level of nitrite in groundwater is not acceptable because its consequences are really very high. But as you can see, and as I explained earlier, the first two samples represent the springs of Ras Al Ain, and this is the threshold. This is the horizontal line. This is the threshold, which is at the same time the WHO and the FAO threshold for nitrite. And you can see that most of the samples, they showed a very high level of nitrite contamination, which means that, including the springs of Ras Al Ain, this means that the waters of Ras Al Ain can no longer be used for neither domestic water use nor for irrigation. And this is a really very bad thing for our resource because it's present at the reserve itself. But it's also a bad sign, not only for the ecosystems, for our health, for the ecosystem inside the terrestrial part of the reserve, for the groundwater, but also for the marine ecosystems and biodiversity, because that water that emerges from the springs of Ras Al Ain eventually goes off to the sea and it pollutes our marine ecosystem. So this is considered as a red flag that we need to intervene. How to intervene? And in order to do this cause-effect analysis using the system, first we need to understand what's causing this direct pollution, this high level of nitrite. In order to understand that, comparing this result with the other parameters that we found are exceeding certain levels for the other parameters and crossing them with the results of nitrite and nitrate, we concluded that the nitrite originated right from around the springs of Ras Al Ain, not from the agricultural practices upstream the Ras Al Ain from the other wells. Because when there are a higher amount of other contaminants at the other wells upstream, they weren't detected at Ras Al Ain. And when this element was detected at Ras Al Ain, at some of the other wells or samples, it wasn't detected at the same level, but at the lower levels. So they are not affecting the levels of nitrite at Ras Al Ain directly. So we conclude that this element, this toxin, originated from right around Ras Al Ain. That is inside the reserve itself by the farmers who overuse nitrate as a source of nitrogen with their fertilizers. So this has been defined. Now, Next step is what? We use this software, we use this entire procedure in order to have action plans, in order to make decisions. And this is what this software helps us do. It's called ISP decision making system. So what possibly could be the decisions to be taken, designed into an action plan. First, we rely back on the agricultural expertise and the dynamics inside an ecosystem and the movement of elements in the soil down to the groundwater and all that. And there are a set of interventions that we could integrate in our management plan regarding the agricultural zone with the stakeholders there, the farmers at Ras Al Ain, because they are the source of this result. So we can intervene with something really soft intervention instead of relying on very hard interventions that wouldn't be accepted by those stakeholders, because eventually we don't want to kill them. We don't want to exclude them from benefiting still from this ecological services, which is the agricultural lands of Ras Al Ain, the water resource of Ras Al Ain, etc. We want to include them, we want to cooperate with them and work all together for the sustainability of the ecosystem and its ecological services. So how to do that? In a participatory approach, providing them with certain managerial interventions that they would accept and that would be applied by them, not very hard on them to consider costly or hard to apply, to adopt, or it's an exclusion measure by us or imposed by us, but at the contrary, it has to be adopted by them with ease and with acceptance. And that is by a simple recommendation of substituting the nitrate source of nitrogen with the ammonia source of nitrogen. So we're not telling them, no, it's not worth. It's not worth. No. Because I'm an agricultural engineer, I know what I'm talking about. Ammonia in this context is much better than nitrate because it's a cation that doesn't migrate down in the soil easily. It gets stuck on the clay particles, and this is after it takes time to be absorbed by the plant roots before it gets transformed into something different that wouldn't affect the ecosystem or the biodiversity. And this is a simple measure to be taken. That is, we are giving them an alternative, not banning them from relying on a good measure to increase their yields. Second, we can just advise them of reducing the quantity, because farmers, from my experience with them, they tend to overuse fertilizers and overuse one element of fertilizers, not considering the whole spectrum of elements that are needed for the production. That is, they consider if they apply nitrogen, then the plant should produce without the application of phosphorus, potassium, and the other nutrients that are crucial for the production. This means that if we advise them, give them the levels that would be satisfactory for them to give good yield, that is, this would first reduce their production cost and at the same time produce better yield in quality, and at the same time it will reduce the pollution. That means that this is another level of intervention or measures that, if adopted well, could enhance their productivity and our environment, so everyone would win, okay, for the environment and for the cost. And third, there is a very simple way of managing the application of fertilizers, which means that there are two parameters to consider upon applying fertilizers. which are first the phase at which the plant is. That is, okay, the plant needs nitrogen. It's amongst the macro elements needed by the plant, but it's not needed all the during the whole life cycle of production. It's needed at certain phases. So why to apply it all year round? We can consider this and make workshops of awareness to explain to them when and how to apply these fertilizers. And the other parameter is that, for instance, if we use nitrogenous and nitrate source of fertilizer under the rain, it's gonna go with the rain because it's highly soluble in water. So it will migrate away from the plant roots, and at the same time, it's not gonna be used by the plant, and it will pollute the entire environment. So timing the fertilizer application is a crucial thing. That is a simple intervention, but with high return. So we can interact with our stakeholders in a participatory approach to continue this endeavor. And this is a managerial intervention that would be what would become easily implemented through the use of our ISP DSS system. So how to sustain that? Now we had conducted our study, we came up, or we conducted our cause-effect analysis, we came up with decisions, we decided or defined the management plan or action plan to follow. Now we defined that, but what about next year? What about the year that follows? How about the situation and to assess the success or effectiveness of our approach? Do we leave it at that? Of course not. What we need to do is to keep monitoring the levels of pollution with these elements that have been detected over time and crossing them with the practices that have been shifted maybe, and that should be shifted after our intervention through the adoption of these good agricultural practices that we would disseminate among our farmers, our stakeholders. And with time, we can keep monitoring our system through the software. That is the first step that we have already conducted. This one has been difficult because it's time consuming and effort consuming and resources consuming. But the second time, it's gonna be a mere collection of the same parameters, not all the parameters, but those of concern, and entering them into the system. And one click away, the result will show up, showing us the progress that we are witnessing. And this means that we can revisit our management plan or our action plan to tweak it to the situation that we have. And with this, we can understand better the importance of this system that would ease the update and upgrade of management plans at protected areas, because doing so without a software, without an innovative tool like this one, would be a daunting effort that no one person would perform successfully or easily on their own. It would need a multitude of expertise and efforts and resources in order to be able to do something like that. But with the help of this tool, we are able to update our action plans and interact with our stakeholders in a successful way, enhancing their benefit from the ecosystems while at the same time conserving our natural resources with the least or the optimal efforts and resources possible. And this is a drawing that dates back to 1857 of the Ras Al Ain Springs. This is exactly how it looks like back then in the 19th century. I'll leave you with it to contemplate for a while and to relax. Thank you.
And You demonstrate perfectly even how analyzing only one component and one type of data, the SOI system and the methodology allow us to be integrated. We are going to present the last group, the team from Jerez, Jordan, represented by Zakaria Al-Manshapa, that is not only the project technical assistant, I'm sorry for not realizing this before, but is the actual database manager. He became database manager while we are performing the training. I leave the floor to you.
Thank you, Eduardo. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. As Eduardo introducing me, I'm Zakaria Al-Manshapa, technical assistant from Jerez, the Royal Marine Conservation Society. Actually, I'm not expert, as he mentioned. I'm learning from him now. So today I'm going to present Jerez's experience with ISP through the Mid4APM project. First of all, I want to talk about the management area, which is located in the north part of the Red Sea, in the southern part of Jordan, which extend to 27 kilometers of coastal area, and it's the only sea coastal area in Jordan. For our system diagram, actually we decided to implement our system diagram based on many workshops conducted with our stakeholders, and we built it based on the ecosystem itself and the component of the area and ecosystem. I'm going to present a video that will show the component of our system diagram and the parts that we built it based on. So, okay. The first part is the socio-economic sectors, which contains the enterprises in the coastal area that have a direct interaction with the coastal area. The second part is the management tool, which contains the scientific research and monitoring programs, security and management control, international collaboration and development. There is also an important part, which is fisheries. It's contain the fishing activities, fishing sites, and occupational fishing facilities. Okay, for the ecosystem itself, we decided based on the opinions of our stakeholders, the experts from our stakeholders, to build it based on non-living component and living components. The non-living components, which contain the seawater, the offshore area, and the coastal area. The fauna or the living component, which contain anything living in the sea. And that's all for the system diagram. Actually, my presentation going more technically about the data proceeding and the types of data that we received from our stakeholders. We received a good amount of data, but actually it's not enough to implement the integrated coastal zone management through ISP. We receive a fisheries data, landing data from 2014 till 2021, Actually, this is a program implementing by GIRITS, and it's still ongoing. We received also fisheries socioeconomic data. This data is a survey have been done in 2018 to study the socioeconomic status of fishermen. Actually, there is some technically problems with this data, how to identify it on ISP and the SQL itself. Also, we received data from the National Monitoring Program from 2006 to 2019, the National Monitoring Program implementing by the Marine Science Station. The actual data, actually, it's from 2000 till now, and it's ongoing National Monitoring Program. We receive also a marine litter data, which is sporadic data. It's from different activities of cleanup, beach cleanup, or diving cleanup. So through these activities, the stakeholders collect the litter and count the distribution of each component of this litter. Also, we received data from Reef Check from 2017 till 2018. It's similar to the National Monitoring Program. The program actually started in 2000 and it's still ongoing till now. We received also data from coastal enterprises, water quality data, which is from the different sectors on the coastal area. Sorry, the marine litter as are repeated. Also, we have blue flag monitoring data, which is an international sign that implemented by GIRITS itself. So we have this data in our database. For data processing, at the beginning, when we receive the data, we start to take a general configuration of the output that we want from these data. So we decided the structure of the data that we want to upload to SQL and present it on ISP. After the configuration of the data, we preparing the structure and upload it with the base map of the location to the SQL and ISP. After uploading the data to SQL, we clean the data from SQL and using the data management tool on ISP itself to upload the data to make the connection between the database and the ISP. After performing queries or any calculations needs on SQL to transform the data in the suitable structure for SQL for ISP, we applying the data on ISP. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about a sample about the management issue that we can perform using the ISP software. This sample is the threats to hard corals. The description anthropogenic threats, fishing gears actually were a small scale of fishing in Aqaba, as it's most of the area are protected area in the north of the coast, in the south of the coast, I'm sorry. The affected coral actually was by, in the next slide we can see it, it's by the thrush in general. The situational analysis data on impact coral suggests that thrush general are the most important stressors for corals in the Japanese garden, which is the previous location. As you see in the graph, this one implementing using ISP. The management indication establishing in-depth monitoring analysis on trash in general to understand how it's affect the coral coverage and enhance the resolution of the monitoring on corals. This video I'm going to show the connections between the coral system and the other components, which components should be affected these corals. So if you see first of all, the coral could be affected by the fishing activities or fisheries. The line shows us the connection between the corals and the fisheries activities, but actually the output and the result of visual analysis using ISP show us that the general thrush was the most affected component on the coral system. For our challenge through using ISP and SQL, actually the managing of data received in different and sometimes complex format was the most important issue, as we actually sometimes receive the data in structure, and in the other time we receive the same data but in different structure. So it's need to convert to a unique structure that acceptable by SQL and ISP. Also, like other partners, we have the same problem with the limitation of data receiving as comparing to generated. The software there is a technical problem with the visual chart in the software. It can be solved, as Marco told me yesterday. This problem, the chart started firstly from the 0 point. So you cannot focus on a specific point. As for temperature, as you know, the sea temperature have a fixed range from 22 to 27 at all semesters. So we don't need to see the temperature from 0 to 22. This gives us a not good visualization of the data. Also, the automatic set of the y-axis maximum and minimum value. While presenting the data using the ISP, sometimes we present a data that have the maximum value with, for example, 10. Then we present the data with the maximum value with around, for example, 12. So the system make it 10 for this chart and 12 for this chart, which make it visualization difficult to compare between different data. For our next step, we are going to make a workshop to share our outputs with our stakeholders and partners in Aqaba to encourage people give us more data and support us in the preparing of database. We are going to provide the database with more data actually through our stakeholders and the continuous development of our database. And thank you.
Thank you, Zaccaria. Thank you for your presentation. Indeed, your availability of accessing the sea is very particular because so you have a very short part of coast, and the sea in front of your country is the place where you have to perform a lot of different activities from tourism to economy. So it's crucial to be well managed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Excuse for being a bit late respect to the program. I don't know if there are any question or consideration or no. Yes. He was first.
Thank you. So my question is for Matteo presentation and for the others, all participants. Really, in the case, for example, it's about the matrix design. In the case of that the component, it's very important, and we don't have the data, or this component have some connection with other components, and we don't have data, or some data or not updated. Really, is there some threshold or criteria to be met in order to keep it or eliminate it? So what is the impact on the results and how we can manage it?
I will give you the floor. I'm just replying. Huh? Vai.
Potete sentirmi? Rispondo in italiano che forse mi riesce bene vista la complessità della domanda. Allora, il nostro ragionamento è stato questo, cioè innanzitutto non abbiamo adattato le componenti del nostro diagramma ai dati che avevamo a disposizione. Quindi in qualche maniera abbiamo prima definito quelle che erano le componenti secondo le classi ufficiali di classificazione, quindi in qualche maniera siamo andati a cercare nella letteratura scientifica e nelle agenzie che producono dati in Italia e in Europa quali erano le classificazioni ufficiali per i dati. Poi abbiamo caricato i dati per le componenti che in qualche modo siamo riusciti a popolare. Quindi chiaramente all'interno del nostro database, magari riesco a mostrarvi velocemente, abbiamo delle componenti vuote. Qual è il risvolto nell'avere componenti vuote nel nostro diagramma? Sicuramente il fatto che poi nella definizione degli indicatori, molti degli indicatori stessi restano senza dati. Quindi in qualche maniera nella successiva System Cause Effect Analysis chiaramente ci saranno delle aree vuote che non riusciamo in questo momento a popolare. Quindi, come ho detto nella mia presentazione, chiaramente l'auspicio è quello di riuscire a coinvolgere gli stakeholders ancora di più per andare a completare tutte le componenti del nostro diagramma. Ora, la domanda è molto interessante, però devo essere sincero, siamo stati anche abbastanza fortunati con gli stakeholder, quindi è vero che molto spesso non abbiamo il dato o lo abbiamo a una risoluzione spaziale e temporale non sufficiente, però comunque siamo riusciti a popolare quasi tutte le componenti del nostro diagramma ed è visto che per la matrice ambientale e per la matrice socio-economica abbiamo delle componenti vuote, ma sono 2 o 3, non di più. Chiaramente il livello di dettaglio del dato fa la differenza, quindi sì, in alcuni casi abbiamo il dato, ma non abbiamo quindi una risoluzione spaziale sufficiente. Quello che per ricollegarmi a quello che dicevo prima, proprio l'auspicio è quello di trovare dei dati con una risoluzione spaziale maggiore, sia in termini di spazialità che di risoluzione temporale. Non so se ho risposto alla domanda, però non so se sarà tradotto, non la vedo con le cuffie.
No, I can understand this Italian language. No, but really, my question is...
Sorry,
okay.
I don't want to interrupt you, but maybe I can reply and I can answer in a more general way, because I understand your question. So, we develop a system diagram that is the representation, the technical and graphical representation of the system that we have to manage. Okay, this was a participatory approach and a process led by the technical team, but together with the stakeholders that for a reason or another, based on expert knowledge, based on available or non-available data, they decide to identify specific component and connection. That means that for the team that is, Tala, excuse me, you are exactly in the middle. For that team, that is the best representation of the system they have to manage. This drives you to understand, of course, which are the best indicators, which are the data available, which are the most important data field campaign in case that you have to realize for filling up the most important data. This means that not all the component, the interaction and the indicators must be satisfied at the first shot. That is reasonable, no? Even a component that has indicator but no data can give a management information, because maybe you are forced to focus on that aspect and you understand that this is a crucial aspect to be taken into account immediately. Or maybe not, because we misfound or we miss budget or whatever, because of course, for every component, for every indicator, for every component, we can identify the best indicator in the world. But then maybe you need $10 million per month for collecting data. So maybe it's not the best choice unless you don't have $10 million per month. So this is another story. So this for telling you that you don't have to feel all. You have to take into account all the most important component and interaction, even because an evolution of the system can be driven in that direction, maybe with another project, because quite often project overlay according to the task that they would like to implement. So another project can see the ISP software, the system diagram, and see, oh, look, these are empty, for this component, there are not available data. Let's focus on that. And this is enhance the management and the systemic approach over the area that you have to take into account.
Okay, thank you.
Mohammed, please. Wait, they bring you the microphone.
Two simple questions that our colleagues. I mean, I'm really the project coordinator. I am the project coordinator, and I'm proud of the progress that has been done so far. But I mean, I still do have some simple questions actually to our colleagues who presented. I mean, Nahed, Amal, and Zakaria. Two simple questions each, if you allow me. For Amal, actually, you said that sea level is impacting crab fisheries. Do you have data for sea level, or is this just a guess? This is just a guess. So this is not an informed decision. Our project is about informed management. So this is just a guess, and we do need sea level data so that we would be sure about.
No, but sorry, there are scientific data that tells that in Knees Island, the sea level rising is the most affected part in the world about sea level rising. It's almost triple than the other.
But I mean,
part.
she says that it's guessing. I mean, sorry. You do not have series data?
Series of data.
Do you have or you don't? You don't. So there is no data. Is there or there isn't? Yes? Yeah. Yes, please. Yes. Okay. Yes.
just to make the people online heard.
Okay, thank you. So I said when we constructed the diagram and when we defined the interactions between the different subcomponents, we identified the indicators and the parameters and the factors that affected these, for example, this activity or production of and so on. But actually, we haven't a monitoring survey of the sea level in this area. But from the bibliographic analysis, we know that this area is affected by this factor. And I mentioned in my presentation that we need a cross analysis of this shore fishing, which I given as an example in my presentation of all the, we need so a cross analysis with all the factors that interact with this sector. So yes, thank you.
Can I add something? For sea level rise, we can generate this type of data from remote sensing, from bathymetric terrain model. So
We need crowd truthing.
uh,
We need crowd truthing. Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks. That was a good clarification. So the management sort of conclusion is that we do need data to support these guesses, I would call them till the moment. We guess that these are the impacts and we do need data to support our guess. So this is our null hypothesis and we do need to support it by information. Thank you for that. My second question, which is also simpler actually, you said that we are not reaching the level of fishing, clam fishing of the year 2000. So you are talking about the fishing itself without talking about the effort of fishing. So if we want to compare, actually, we compare quantity of fishing per unit effort. So it's effort per effort. So one man is catching one fish and 10 men are catching 10 fish. If 10 men now are catching one fish, this means there is an impact. But if 10 men are catching, so it's catch per effort. This is how you talk about, you measure fishes.
No, it's a quantity per year. Yes.
How many fishermen are working? How many fishermen were working?
We'll see.
She said 300 lady that collect the clams. She said
We
in
can
the presentation. No, in the presentation.
Yes.
Yes.
I understand you, but in the presentation, I compare the clam quantity at time scale. I didn't take into account the fishing effort. Yes, the effort.
So then our management conclusion is that we need a detailed fishing effort analysis so that we would be able to understand the thing, in a more sort of coherent way. Thank you very much for that. Nahed, thank you for your representation, actually. You went and analyzed 26 water samples. You found high nitrite levels, and you made all these conclusions. Do you have any historical data of nitrite in that area?
Okay, it's sufficient to find nitrite once in an important water resource to raise the red flag. What I meant to say here, and from historical information and interaction with our Lebanese farmers, we know that it's a common knowledge that our farmers tend to overuse fertilizers and pesticides and misuse them. And nitrite level doesn't rise this much unless it was historically overused, because it's not a product by itself. It's a byproduct of nitrate fertilizer. And so if we detected nitrite in a water source that's distributed to households and the threshold that's defined by the WHO for drinking water is crossed by this level, it means that we need to at least freeze the distribution to households until we solve this problem. So we're not saying that we're gonna throw away all the waters of Ras Al Ain. What we are saying that in any scenario, we need to raise the awareness of the farmers of Ras Al Ain, interfere with them, interact with them in order to enhance their agricultural practices, specifically the use of fertilizers and pesticides. Luckily, we didn't find any pollutants generated by the pesticides, but from fertilizers, we detected them. This means that there is this effect from their practices, and we need to intervene. We cannot like close our eyes and say, okay, we detected it once, so it's not a big deal. No, at any instance, we need to inform our farmers about the best practice to follow. And I said that we need to keep monitoring the quality of our water. And not only this, this is just an example to demonstrate that we were able to do the exercise and to use this tool in an appropriate way, and how we can use it in order to integrate action plans into our management plan. But of course, we have other important components at the reserve that we need to monitor, and we will follow the same steps in order to achieve or be able to take measures and to interact better with our stakeholders and to upgrade our management plan. That's it. It's an example. Of course, it's not. It wasn't there. Yes, because ammonia, you know, ammonia is a cation, and our soil is somehow clayey. And clay soils, they have negatively charged particles where the anions get absorbed to, while cations, they are repelled. And so the cations, sorry, it's the opposite. Cations get absorbed on the clay because it's negatively charged and organic matter, and that is the composition of our soil. So ammonia, even if it was over applied, first it evaporates fast, and second, it doesn't dissipate into groundwater, which means it's a natural and normal result that we got. We didn't detect ammonia in the water. Yes, but we didn't have that result.
Okay, excuse me, Mohammed, but we are a bit out of time. So you are the lead beneficiary of the project. So we will have all the time for discussing these. And even we have a session tomorrow. So I thank you all for the attention. Mohammed, we are run out of time. I'm sorry. And I leave the floor to Marrico Benelli and Marco Falcetta for the last session of the day.